The university's actions are a deliberate attack on the fields of American Indian and Indigenous studies, and on ethnic studies and the humanities more broadly. As throughout American history, natives are an inconvenience to a grander democratic vision that cannot be realized without violence, and that erases the elements of indigeneity that it cannot appropriate. The assumption underlying every justification of the administration's decision is that indigenous peoples cannot make autonomous decisions. They require the oversight of their more sage and responsible superiors. It's a perfect allegory of federal Indian policy, only it's not actually allegorical. Civility is not a state of mind, it's a regime. Let's look at an apparently trenchant word, students. The administration is doing everything for the students, right? Never mind that students have been rigorously patronized and infantilized, but which students are the administrators purporting to help? Let me point out two things. One, that the students in this instance aren't communities of actual human beings, but an invention of university management. And two, that it's the most privileged among the student body who are beneficiaries of the administration's magnanimity. Students of color, queer and transsexual students, low-income students, students in the margins. Management rarely includes them in its deliberations. They're useful only insofar as the conceits of multiculturalism can foreclose real democratic participation. No matter how much tuition these students pay, no matter how much they contribute to the vibrancy of intellectual life on campus, they can never be students quite as authoritatively as their normative counterparts. And I had lunch with the students of SJP from Loyola today, and it absolutely reinforced everything I just said, right? While the administration is busy protecting its students and coddling its students and infantilizing its students, make-believe students, right? It's busy attacking and throwing under the bus its Palestinian students. This is a problem of access and representation on many campuses. UIUC is happy to feature American Indian studies in its diversity pamphleteering, but is much less eager to support even nominal acts of departmental sovereignty. Students on the margins, in fact, are constantly made to justify their existence in the elegant spaces of academe. Take the oft-repeated contention that Jewish students would be uncomfortable in my classes. I leave aside the assumption that discomfort is somehow inimical to a useful education, and the qualifications of Gentiles to decide who is or is not Jewish. I would never wish on Jewish students even a hint of acrimony. One reason why it's so discomfiting that they are homogenized as proto-Zionists in this characterization of my pedagogy. I oppose the policies of the State of Israel. That's the extent of my engagement with Jewish culture, which is to say I have very little engagement with it at all. If people feel attacked on a cultural level when somebody condemns a nation state, then that's a problem of ethno-nationalism, not of political critique. There's nothing in my record as a scholar or teacher that indicates even a scintilla of anti-Semitism. I go on record again to say I detest the phenomena. But take any Zionist ideologue, and there are many of them running classrooms. They support, at least tacitly, ethnic cleansing, military occupation, displacement, home demolition, ethnocracy. In short, a profoundly undemocratic state whose violations of human rights are well documented. How are Palestinian, Arab, or Muslim students to feel in one of their classes? It's always the marginal, the undesirable, the wretched who must justify their humanity to the majority. The structural violence of the normative, meanwhile, gets to define itself as benign. And why, anyway, must folks who have never uttered an anti-Semitic statement constantly make our opposition to anti-Semitism explicit? Nobody else has to proclaim opposition to things they've never endorsed. More important, why don't those who repeatedly disparage Palestinians ever have to answer to their troublesome beliefs? I would love to see folks who condone the slaughter of children and the illegal settlement of foreign territory disavow themselves of anti-Arab racism. It's because Israel is the default norm of civility. Israelis are assumed to be human. To criticize them then is inherently aggressive. Palestinians, on the other hand, must loudly denounce aggression at every imaginable moment in order to be considered human in the first place. Every SJP member around the country will tell you how true that is, right? Even as we suffer the unrelenting violence of Israeli colonization, our barbarity is atavistic and imminent. It precedes our subjectivity, restricts our earthly presence, and marks us as inferior. We can achieve the lofty status of pitiable only when we grovel. We constitute a species that must genuflect in order to earn the trust of those by whom we are conquered and defined. I'm no anti-Semite. I say it clearly. I now await my detractors' proclamations that they consider Palestinians worthy of respect and equality. Israel is losing the PR battle, the proverbial hearts and minds. Its supporters, in turn, are lashing out with the sort of desperation endemic to any strong party in decline. They are punitive and belligerent in the absence of honest debate. This is about deeply undemocratic power reasserting itself, refusing to cede even a word to Palestinians in a deeply compromised public discourse. Simply stated, it's colonial paranoia. This should be easy for anybody to see. If your first impulse, upon encountering a viewpoint you dislike, is to punish the speaker, then you tacitly confess that your position has no merit. And now civility is spreading through universities as quickly as settlers overwhelmed the North American continent. Administrators love the word. It means anything they want it to mean, and always implies something sinister without having to justify or explain. The term perfectly encapsulates the sheer force of panic that pervades the elite when they need to find an effortless way to hamper debate. No argument to be made? No problem. Shut the entire thing down. This is particularly troublesome when it comes to faculty governance. Do we want experts in their fields in charge of hiring? Or do we concede that difficult task to the Simon Wiesenthal Center? If you want to support me, support the people of Palestine. Support natives still dispossessed of land and resources. Support African Americans brutalized by the police. Support anybody subject to systematic state violence. My having a job changes nothing. I'm merely a symbol of the stark imperatives of the wealthy and well-connected. We all are, really. Unless the system changes at a basic level, everybody's merely buying shares in a neoliberal corporation with the power to dissolve our interests the moment we become an inconvenience. There's one thing I remember most from the episodes of unmitigated brutality in Gaza: the ice cream freezers. Oh, nothing affected me more. Few things better exemplify the gaiety and innocence of childhood than rummaging through boxes of frozen confections. During Israel's recent bombing campaign, however, the ice cream freezers weren't stacked with popsicles and sorbet. Instead, they stored the bodies of dead children. The symbolism is endless. Ice cream and children's bodies. They usually intermingle in messy harmony. This time, though, the bodies had replaced the treats. The children had nothing to imbibe. Their corpses were on display for a much different sort of rummaging. They were in ice cream freezers because morgues had run out of space. A problem not only of warfare, but of overcrowded neighborhoods and geographical entrapment. Gaza's lack of electricity threatened rapid decomposition. The children rested atop one another in containers that likely provided some of their happiest moments when they were alive. There's nothing poetic about this juxtaposition. It's a terrible algorithm of combustion and confinement. Thus I tweeted, "The evidence in my case is clear. I'm no anti-Semite, I'm no terrorist, I'm no bully, I'm no savage. I'm a man who was fired because I condemned Israeli policy in language appropriate to a horrible occasion, rather than in the meek platitudes of civility. I prefer moral clarity. After all, there's nothing civil about dead children in an ice cream freezer. Thank you.